The rain fell hard against the windows of the black Mercedes as it moved through the empty streets of Manhattan at 2 in the morning. Marcus Wellington sat in the back seat, his expensive suit wrinkled from the long business dinner that had stretched past midnight. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked at his phone. 17 missed calls from his assistant, 23 unread emails, and a reminder about the board meeting at 8 in the morning. At 35 years old, Marcus had built his technology empire from nothing. His company, Wellington Tech, was worth over $3 billion, and everyone in the business world knew his name. But success had come at a price. He worked 18-hour days, rarely saw his family, and hadn't taken a real vacation in 5 years. Tonight was no different. Another deal closed, another step toward expanding his empire. "Sir, we're almost at your building," said James, his driver of 10 years. James was one of the few people Marcus trusted completely. He never asked questions, never gossiped about what he saw or heard, and always arrived exactly when needed. Marcus nodded and went back to his phone. He was reading through urgent emails when something made him look up. There, on the sidewalk in front of his luxury apartment building, was a small figure huddled against the wall. The person was covered by a thin blanket that was soaked through from the rain. "James, stop the car," Marcus said suddenly. James pulled over without question. Marcus stared at the homeless person for a moment. The city was full of people sleeping on the streets, and, usually, he didn't pay attention. He donated money to charities every year, wrote checks that made him feel better about the problem, but he never got personally involved. Tonight felt different somehow. As he watched, the wind blew the blanket away from the person's face, and Marcus felt his heart stop. It was Rosa Martinez, the woman who had cleaned his office building for the past 3 years. Rosa, who always smiled and said good morning when she saw him. Rosa, who worked quietly and efficiently, making sure his workspace was perfect every single day. "Wait here," Marcus told James, opening the car door before his driver could object. The rain hit him immediately, soaking through his expensive suit within seconds. Marcus didn't care. He walked quickly to where Rosa lay sleeping against the cold brick wall. Up close, he could see how thin she had become. Her work uniform was dirty and torn, and her shoes had holes that let the rain through. "Rosa?" he said softly, kneeling down beside her. She woke up with a start, fear flashing across her face. When she recognized him, the fear turned to shame. She tried to cover herself with the wet blanket and struggled to sit up straighter. "Mr. Wellington," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm sorry. I didn't know this was your building. I'll move right away." "Rosa, what happened? Why are you out here?" Marcus asked, genuinely concerned. Tears began to run down Rosa's face. "I lost my apartment 2 weeks ago. I've been staying in different places, but tonight I had nowhere else to go. I know I shouldn't be here. Please don't call the police." Marcus felt something break inside his chest. Here was a woman who had worked for his company for 3 years, who had always been reliable and kind, and she was sleeping on the street. How had he not known? How had no one told him? "When did you last eat?" he asked. Rosa looked away. "Yesterday morning. But I'm okay. I'll find something tomorrow." Marcus stood up, his mind racing. "Come with me," he said, extending his hand to help her up. "Sir, I can't. I'm all wet and dirty. Your building is too nice for someone like me." "Rosa, I own the building. Come with me, please." With shaking hands, Rosa took his help and stood up. Marcus noticed she was unsteady on her feet, probably from hunger and exhaustion. He kept one hand on her arm to make sure she didn't fall as they walked toward his building. The doorman, Carlos, looked surprised when he saw Marcus helping a homeless woman toward the entrance. Carlos had worked for Marcus for 8 years and had never seen his boss show this kind of personal concern for anyone. "Good evening, Mr. Wellington," Carlos said professionally, opening the door without comment. "Carlos, this is Rosa Martinez. She works for our company. She'll be staying in the guest apartment tonight." Carlos nodded as if this was completely normal. "Of course, sir. Would you like me to prepare anything? Some food, if the kitchen staff is still available. Something warm." In the elevator, Marcus and Rosa stood in awkward silence. Rosa kept apologizing and trying to explain her situation. Marcus listened, learning for the first time about the woman who had been part of his daily life for 3 years. Rosa had come to America from Guatemala 15 years ago with her young daughter, Maria. She had worked multiple jobs to support them both. Maria was now 18 and had just started college with a scholarship to study nursing. Rosa was proud of her daughter, but had been struggling to pay for the expenses that the scholarship didn't cover. I took a second job at night, Rosa explained. But then, the building where I was cleaning at night was sold, and they let all the cleaning staff go. I couldn't afford the rent anymore with just the one job. Why didn't you ask for more hours at Wellington Tech? Or request a raise? Marcus asked. Rosa looked at him as if he had suggested she ask for the moon. Mr. Wellington, people like me don't ask people like you for favors. We're grateful for what we have, and try not to cause problems. Marcus felt ashamed. How many other employees were struggling while he lived in luxury? How many Rosa Martinez's were there working for his company, invisible to him despite being essential to his daily life? The elevator opened on the 15th floor, where Marcus kept a guest apartment for business visitors. He rarely used it himself, preferring his penthouse on the top floor. The apartment was fully furnished and had everything Rosa would need. You can stay here tonight, Marcus said, unlocking the door. Tomorrow we'll figure out something more permanent. Rosa stepped inside and gasped. The apartment was bigger than any place she had ever lived. It had a full kitchen, a comfortable living room, and a bedroom with a real bed. After sleeping on the street for weeks, it felt like paradise. Mr. Wellington, I can't stay here. This is too much. Rosa, you're an employee of my company. I should have known about your situation weeks ago. This is the least I can do. A knock at the door interrupted them. Carlos had arrived with a tray of food from the building's restaurant. There was hot soup, fresh bread, a salad, and a piece of chocolate cake. Rosa stared at the food as if she couldn't believe it was real. Please, eat, Marcus said, and get some rest. I'll see you tomorrow. As Marcus turned to leave, Rosa called out to him. Mr. Wellington, why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Marcus paused at the door. He thought about all the times Rosa had made his office perfect, all the mornings she had smiled at him, all the ways she had made his work life better without him ever really noticing her as a person. I'm doing this because it's right, he said finally, and because I should have done it sooner. Back in his penthouse, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat by his window looking out at the city, thinking about Rosa and wondering how many other people were struggling while he lived in comfort. He had always told himself that creating jobs and donating money was enough. But seeing Rosa on the street had shown him how disconnected he was from the real lives of the people who worked for him. He spent the rest of the night researching his company's employee policies, looking into wages and benefits for the cleaning staff. What he found disturbed him. The cleaning staff were technically employed by a contracting company, which meant they didn't get the same benefits as his direct employees. They had no health insurance through work, no paid sick days, and no retirement planning help. Marcus realized that while he had focused on building his business empire, he had overlooked the human cost. People like Rosa were essential to his success, but they were invisible to him. They worked in his building every day, but he had never thought about their lives outside of work. The next morning, Marcus canceled his first 3 meetings. He called his head of human resources and asked for a complete report on all contract employees. He wanted to know how many people worked in his buildings, what they were paid, and what benefits they received. Sir, is there a specific problem? Asked Jennifer Walsh, his HR director. Yes, Marcus said. The problem is that I don't know anything about the people who make my business possible every day. At 8 in the morning, Marcus went down to the guest apartment to check on Rosa. She answered the door looking much better after a good night's sleep and a proper meal. She had managed to clean and mend her uniform, and she looked more like the Rosa he was used to seeing at work. Mr. Wellington, thank you so much for everything. I'll go to work now and then find somewhere else to stay tonight. I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. Rosa, we need to talk about your situation and about some changes I'm thinking of making. They sat down in the living room, and Marcus asked Rosa to tell him more about her life. He learned that she had been working since she was 12 years old, first in Guatemala and then in America. She had never learned to read English well, which limited her job opportunities. She sent money back to Guatemala to help her elderly mother and had been saving every penny to help Maria through college. Maria is so smart, Rosa said. her face lighting up when she talked about her daughter. She wants to be a nurse and help people. She's the first person in our family to go to college. What about your dreams, Rosa? What did you want to do with your life? Rosa looked puzzled by the question. My dream was to give Maria a better life than I had. That's what mothers do. Marcus found himself deeply moved by Rosa's selflessness. Here was a woman who had sacrificed everything for her daughter's education, who had worked multiple jobs and lived in poverty so that the next generation could have opportunities she never had. Rosa, I want to offer you a full-time position directly with Wellington Tech, not through the contracting company. You would have health insurance, paid vacation days, and a salary increase. Rosa stared at him in shock. Sir, I don't understand. I'm just a cleaning lady. You're not just anything, Rosa. You're a valuable employee who has been making my work life better for 3 years. It's time our company recognized that properly. Tears began to flow down Rosa's face again. But this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. Mr. Wellington, I don't know what to say. Say yes, and let me help you find a proper apartment. The company can advance you the money for a security deposit. But why would you do all this for someone like me? Marcus looked at this hard-working woman who had been invisible to him for so long. Because everyone deserves to be seen, Rosa. And because when we lift each other up, we all become stronger. That afternoon, Marcus called an emergency meeting with his executive team. He announced that Wellington Tech would be bringing all contract employees in-house within 6 months. They would receive full benefits, salary increases, and opportunities for advancement and education. Sir, this will cost the company millions of dollars, said his CFO, Robert Chun. Robert, we made over $200 million in profit last year. We can afford to treat our employees properly. In fact, we can't afford not to. Some of his executives looked confused by this sudden change in priorities, but Marcus was determined. Seeing Rosa on the street had opened his eyes to something important. Success wasn't just about profit margins and stock prices. It was about creating a company that valued every person who contributed to its success. Over the next few days, word spread through the building about what had happened with Rosa. Some people whispered that Marcus had lost his mind, that he was being too generous. But others, especially the lower-paid workers, began to look at their boss differently. They saw that maybe he did care about them as people, not just as workers. Rosa moved into a small but comfortable apartment near her daughter's college. For the first time in years, she didn't have to worry about making rent. She had health insurance, which meant she could finally see a doctor about the back pain that had been bothering her for months. Most importantly, she could help Maria with college expenses without going hungry herself. Mom, I can't believe all this happened, Maria said when Rosa told her the story. Mr. Wellington must be a very good man. He is, Rosa agreed. But I think maybe he's learning to be even better. Marcus continued to arrive at his office building every morning. But now he made a point of greeting the cleaning staff, the security guards, and the maintenance workers. He learned their names, asked about their families, and listened to their concerns. What he discovered amazed him. These employees had great ideas for improving the building's efficiency. They noticed problems that his executives missed. They had suggestions for saving money and improving security. They had been there all along, willing to contribute more than just their basic job duties, but no one had ever asked for their input. Marcus realized that he had been missing a huge opportunity. By treating these employees as invisible, he had been wasting their potential and their loyalty. Now, as he began to include them in the company's success, he saw improvements throughout his organization. The story of Rosa and Marcus began to spread beyond Wellington Tech. Local news stations picked up the story of the billionaire who found his maid sleeping on the street and changed his entire company policy as a result. Some people praised Marcus for his compassion, while others criticized him for not noticing the problem sooner. Marcus didn't care about the publicity, positive or negative. What mattered to him was the change he saw in his company's culture. Employees were more engaged, more loyal, and more productive. Turnover decreased dramatically. The company's reputation improved, which actually helped with recruiting top talent and attracting new clients. But the biggest change was in Marcus himself. He found that work became more meaningful when he connected with the people who made his success possible. He discovered that true leadership wasn't about commanding from the top of a tower. It was about lifting others up along the way. 3 weeks after that rainy night, Marcus was working late in his office when Rosa knocked on his door. She was finishing her shift and wanted to thank him again for everything he had done. "Mr. Wellington, I brought you something," she said, holding out a small wrapped package. Inside was a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue wool. "My grandmother taught me to knit when I was little. I made this for you because you gave me hope when I had none." Marcus was touched by the gift, but even more moved by what Rosa said next. "You know, sir, I used to be invisible. I would clean around P6 months after that rainy night changed everything." Wellington Tech looked completely different from the inside. Marcus had kept his promise to bring all contract employees in-house, and the results were beyond anything he had expected. The company wasn't just more profitable, it was more human. Rosa Martinez had become something of a legend in the building. Her story had spread through every floor, and she found herself in an unusual position. Other employees sought her out for advice, and management consulted with her about policy changes. Marcus had promoted her to head of building operations, a position that recognized her years of experience and deep understanding of how the building actually functioned. "I never thought I'd be sitting in meetings with executives," Rosa told her daughter Maria over dinner in their new apartment. The space wasn't large, but it was theirs, and it was safe. Maria was doing well in her nursing program, and for the first time in years, Rosa wasn't working multiple jobs just to survive. "Mom, you've always been smart. People just needed to start listening," Maria replied. She was proud of how her mother had grown into her new role, but she wasn't surprised. Rosa had always been the problem solver in their family. Marcus had learned to listen in ways he never had before. Every Tuesday morning, he held open office hours where any employee could come talk to him directly. The idea had come from Rosa, who pointed out that executives often made decisions without understanding how those decisions affected the people who actually did the work. The Tuesday meetings had revealed problems Marcus never knew existed. The building's ventilation system wasn't working properly on the third floor, making it hard for employees to concentrate. The cleaning supplies being used in the executive offices were much higher quality than what was provided for the rest of the building. The employee break room in the basement had no windows and felt like a prison. "These aren't small problems," Marcus told his executive team during their weekly strategy meeting. "These are the daily realities that affect how our people feel about coming to work." His CFO, Robert Chen, still struggled with some of the changes. "Marcus, I understand the human element, but we've increased our operating costs by 15% this year. The board is asking questions. Tell the board to look at our productivity numbers, Robert. Tell them about our employee retention rate. Tell them how our client satisfaction scores have improved. When people feel valued, everything gets better." Marcus was right, though the executives had initially been skeptical. Productivity was up 18% company-wide. Employee turnover had dropped by 60%, saving the company hundreds of thousands in recruiting and training costs. Client feedback consistently praised the professionalism and dedication of Wellington Tech employees. But the most dramatic change was in Marcus himself. The man who had once worked 18-hour days without noticing the people around him now made time for what he called floor walks. 3 times a week, he would spend an hour walking through different parts of the building, talking to employees at every level. During one of these walks, Marcus met James Patterson, a security guard who worked the night shift. James was a veteran who had lost his leg in Afghanistan and was struggling to find steady work before Wellington Tech hired him. Like Rosa, James had ideas that management had never heard. "Mr. Wellington, I've been thinking about the building's security system," James said one evening when Marcus stopped by the security desk. "We're spending a lot of money on technology, but we're not using the best security asset we have." "What's that, James?" "The people who are here all the time. The cleaning staff, the security guards, the maintenance workers. We see everything, but nobody ever asks us what we notice. I could tell you which employees are having personal problems, which vendors seem suspicious, which areas of the building have safety issues. But there's no system for sharing that information." Marcus was intrigued. "What are you suggesting?" "A weekly security briefing that includes all staff, not just security personnel, and training for everyone on what to watch for. Most of your employees want to help keep the workplace safe, but they don't know how. Within a month, Marcus had implemented James's suggestion. The weekly security briefings became popular among employees, who appreciated being included in keeping their workplace safe. The program prevented 2 potential break-ins and identified a vendor who was stealing supplies. Word about Wellington Tech's transformation began to spread through the business community. Other CEOs called Marcus to ask about his employee programs. Business schools requested case studies. Magazine reporters wanted interviews. Marcus was careful about the publicity. He didn't want the story to become about him being a hero. The real heroes were people like Rosa, who had survived homelessness and still showed up to work every day. People like James, who had served his country and then continued serving his community. People like Maria Santos, a single mother who worked in accounting and was now taking advantage of the company's new education program to earn her CPA certification. The education program had been another employee suggestion. During one of his Tuesday office hours, several workers had mentioned wanting to develop new skills, but not being able to afford classes. Marcus worked with local colleges to create partnerships that offered discounted tuition for Wellington Tech employees. Education is an investment in our company's future, Marcus told a reporter from Business Weekly. When our employees grow, our company grows. But not everyone was happy with the changes. Some of Marcus's wealthy peers thought he had lost his mind. They couldn't understand why he was wasting money on cleaning staff and security guards when he could be maximizing profits for shareholders. Marcus has gone soft, said Richard Blackstone, CEO of Blackstone Industries, during a private dinner party in Manhattan. All this touchy-feely employee stuff is just expensive virtue signaling. His shareholders should be demanding better returns. Marcus heard about these comments, but didn't let them bother him. His company's stock price had actually increased by 12% since he started the employee programs. Investors were impressed by the improved productivity and lower operating costs that came from reduced employee turnover. More importantly, Marcus had discovered that success felt different when it was shared. Making money for shareholders was satisfying, but helping Rosa find stable housing or enabling James to use his military experience in meaningful ways, or watching Maria Santos work toward her CPA certification. These things made Marcus feel successful as a human being, not just as a businessman. The transformation wasn't always smooth. Some employees were suspicious of the changes at first, wondering if Marcus was trying to manipulate them somehow. Others took advantage of the new policies, assuming that Marcus's kindness meant he wouldn't hold people accountable for their work. Rosa helped Marcus navigate these challenges. Her experience and wisdom had made her invaluable not just as head of building operations, but as an advisor on employee relations. Mr. Wellington, some people will test you to see if you really mean what you say, she told him during one of their weekly check-ins. But most people just want to know that their work matters and that they're treated with respect. If you stay consistent, people will believe in what you're trying to do. Rosa's advice proved correct. As months passed, even the skeptical employees began to trust that the changes were real and permanent. They started offering their own suggestions for improving the workplace. They began to take more pride in their work, knowing that someone in leadership actually noticed and appreciated their efforts. One of the most successful initiatives came from Linda Torres, who worked in the company cafeteria. Linda had noticed that many employees were bringing lunch from home because the cafeteria food was expensive and not very healthy. She approached Rosa with an idea for a weekly cultural food day, where employees could share dishes from their heritage. People always talk about wanting more diversity in the workplace, Linda explained to Rosa. But real diversity starts with understanding and appreciating each other's cultures. Food is a great way to do that. The cultural food days became enormously popular. Employees looked forward to trying new dishes and learning about their coworkers' backgrounds. The events also saved money for workers who couldn't afford to buy lunch every day. Marcus realized that Linda's idea represented something powerful. When employees felt valued and heard, they naturally wanted to contribute to making the workplace better for everyone. The cultural food days weren't just about food. They were about building community within the company. As Wellington Tech's first year of transformation came to an end, Marcus decided to host a company-wide celebration. He rented a hotel ballroom and invited every employee from executives to cleaning staff, along with their families. The evening was magical in ways Marcus hadn't expected. He watched Rosa's daughter Maria chatting with executives about her nursing studies. He saw James Patterson sharing military stories with young engineers who were fascinated by his experiences. He observed Linda Torres teaching the CFO's wife how to make authentic tamales. This is what success looks like, Marcus thought to himself as he watched his employees connecting as human beings rather than just co-workers. During the dinner, Marcus gave a speech that he had been thinking about for weeks. A year ago, I thought I knew what success meant, he told the crowd. I measured it in stock prices and profit margins. I thought leadership meant making tough decisions from the top of the corporate ladder. I was wrong. He looked out at the faces in the audience, some familiar from years of working together, others new since the company had started growing again. Success isn't about how much money you make or how impressive your office is. Success is about creating something that makes everyone involved better than they were before. It's about building a place where people can grow, where families can thrive, where everyone's contribution is valued. The applause was warm and genuine. But the moment that meant the most to Marcus came after the formal dinner ended. Rosa approached him with tears in her eyes. Mr. Wellington, I want to tell you something. My daughter Maria called me last week from school. She said her nursing professors are amazed by how articulate she is, how well she presents herself, how confident she seems. Maria told them it's because her mother works for a company that treats people with dignity, and that dignity has made our whole family stronger. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. Rosa, you've taught me more about leadership in the past year than I learned in my entire business career before. No, sir. You taught yourself. You just needed to remember that business is about people, and people deserve respect. As the evening wound down and families began heading home, Marcus reflected on how much had changed. A year ago, he had been successful by traditional measures, but lonely and disconnected from the human impact of his work. Now, he felt part of something larger than himself. The transformation of Wellington Tech wasn't complete. It probably never would be completely finished because companies, like people, need to keep growing and learning. But the foundation was solid now. The company had become a place where human dignity wasn't just respected, it was celebrated. Walking through the hotel lobby as the celebration ended, Marcus overheard a conversation between two employees' children. One was Maria Martinez, Rosa's daughter. The other was Tommy Chun, the CFO's 8-year-old son. Your mom works with my dad, Tommy was saying to Maria. Yeah, my mom says your dad is learning to be nicer to employees, Maria replied with the honesty that only teenagers possess. Tommy nodded seriously. My dad says your mom is the smartest person in the building. He says she knows things about running a company that he's still learning. Marcus smiled to himself. When children could see adults from different backgrounds respecting and learning from each other, that was proof that real change was happening. The next Monday morning, Marcus arrived at his office building with a sense of anticipation rather than the dread he used to feel. He greeted Carlos at the front door, chatted with Linda in the cafeteria, and stopped by the security desk to check in with James. But the person he most looked forward to seeing was Rosa. Their weekly check-ins had become one of the most important parts of his schedule. Rosa had a way of cutting through corporate complexity to identify what really mattered. Good morning, Rosa. How was your weekend? Very good, Mr. Wellington. Maria got an A on her midterm exam in anatomy. She's thinking about specializing in pediatric nursing. That's wonderful. She's going to make a great nurse. Rosa smiled, but then her expression became more serious. Mr. Wellington, I've been thinking about something. We've done a lot of good work here at Wellington Tech, but there are so many other companies where people like me are still invisible. Have you ever thought about sharing what we've learned with other business leaders? Marcus had been thinking the same thing. What did you have in mind, Rosa? Maybe we could create a program to help other companies understand how to value all their employees. Not just the executives, but everyone who contributes to making the business work. Marcus felt excited by the possibility. Wellington Tech's transformation had been successful beyond his wildest dreams, but Rosa was right. They had a responsibility to share what they had learned. Rosa, I think that's a brilliant idea, but I don't want to do it without you. Would you be willing to help me develop this program? 2 years had passed since that life-changing rainy night, and the Wellington Institute for Workplace Dignity was about to launch its first public program. Marcus and Rosa had spent months developing a curriculum that would teach business leaders how to recognize and value every employee in their organizations. The institute occupied an entire floor of a building in downtown Manhattan, just 6 blocks from where Marcus had found Rosa sleeping on the street. The irony wasn't lost on either of them that they were now working together in one of the most expensive business districts in the world, helping other companies learn what they had discovered about human dignity in the workplace. Rosa had officially become the Institute's Director of Employee Relations, a title that still amazed her sometimes. She had completed a business leadership program at Columbia University, taking classes in the evenings while continuing to work at Wellington Tech. Marcus had encouraged her education and paid for the courses, but Rosa had done the hard work of learning new skills while raising her daughter and managing her full-time responsibilities. "Mom, you're going to be on the cover of Fortune magazine," Maria announced as she burst into Rosa's office, waving a copy of the magazine. "Look at this." The cover showed Marcus and Rosa standing together in front of the Wellington Tech building, with the headline, "The Billionaire and the Maid: How One Act of Kindness Changed Corporate America." Rosa studied the photo, still struggling to believe that the woman in the expensive business suit was really her. "Maria, sometimes I look in the mirror and don't recognize myself." "You're still the same person, Mom. You just have better clothes now," Maria said with a grin. At 20, Maria was in her final year of nursing school and had already been accepted into a prestigious pediatric nursing residency program. The scholarship that had started her education was still important, but now the family could afford the additional expenses without Rosa having to choose between rent and food. The Fortune article was the latest in a series of media stories about Wellington Tech's transformation and the Institute's upcoming launch. Business leaders from around the world had requested consultations. Universities wanted to include their model in MBA programs. Even government officials were interested in understanding how the principles might apply to public sector organizations. But Marcus and Rosa remained focused on their core mission, helping other companies recognize the value and potential in every employee, regardless of their job title or background. Their first major client was Meridian Industries, a manufacturing company in Detroit. The company was struggling with high employee turnover, low productivity, and a toxic workplace culture. The CEO, Patricia Williams, had heard about Wellington Tech and was desperate enough to try something new. "I'll be honest," Patricia told Marcus during their initial phone call. "I'm skeptical about all this feel-good employee stuff. But we're losing money every quarter, and our workforce is demoralized. If you can show me how treating employees better actually improves the bottom line, I'm willing to listen." Marcus and Rosa flew to Detroit the following week. What they found at Meridian Industries was familiar: a company where executives made decisions without input from workers, where employees felt invisible and undervalued, where the focus on short-term profits had created long-term problems. During their visit, Marcus and Rosa spent most of their time talking to frontline employees rather than executives. They learned about Maria Gonzalez, a line supervisor who had been with the company for 12 years but had never been consulted about process improvements, despite having suggestions that could save time and money. They met Robert Johnson, a maintenance worker who had noticed safety issues but felt uncomfortable reporting them to management. They talked with Jennifer Walsh, a quality control inspector who had ideas for reducing product defects but no forum for sharing her insights. "These people are sitting on solutions to your company's biggest problems," Rosa told Patricia during their final meeting. "But they don't believe anyone wants to hear from them. How do we change that?" Patricia asked. Marcus and Rosa outlined a comprehensive plan based on their Wellington Tech experience. Regular feedback sessions with frontline employees, investment in worker development and education, transparent communication about company challenges and successes, recognition programs that valued all contributions, not just executive achievements. "But here's the most important part," Rosa added. "This can't be a short-term program that you abandon when times get tough. Employees will only trust you if they see consistent, long-term commitment to treating them as valuable human beings rather than just labor costs." Patricia agreed to implement the program, but Marcus could see she was still skeptical about the return on investment. that skepticism began to fade within 3 months. Employee suggestions led to process improvements that saved Meridian Industries over $2 million in the first year. Productivity increased by 22%. Most importantly, employee turnover dropped dramatically, saving hundreds of thousands in recruiting and training costs. I have to admit, I was wrong, Patricia told Marcus during a 6-month check-in call. I thought employee satisfaction was just a nice bonus if you could afford it. I didn't realize it was essential for business success. The success at Meridian Industries led to requests from other companies. Within a year, the Wellington Institute was working with organizations across multiple industries: healthcare systems, retail chains, technology companies, and government agencies. Each client taught Marcus and Rosa something new about the challenges of creating dignified workplaces. At Riverside Hospital in Chicago, they learned how to apply their principles in high-stress healthcare environments. At Global Retail Solutions, they discovered how to implement change across hundreds of locations in different states. At the Department of Motor Vehicles in California, they figured out how to transform government bureaucracy into genuine public service. But the most rewarding project came from an unexpected source: Blackstone Industries. The company whose CEO, Richard Blackstone, had once criticized Marcus for going soft on employee policies. Richard called Marcus on a Thursday afternoon, his voice strained with embarrassment. "Marcus, I need to eat some crow. My company is falling apart, and I think you might be able to help." Blackstone Industries was facing a crisis. A series of workplace accidents had led to government investigations and massive lawsuits. Employee morale was at an all-time low, with some departments experiencing 100% annual turnover. The company's stock price had dropped by 40% in 6 months. "Richard, what changed your mind about employee relations?" Marcus asked. "I hired a consulting firm to figure out why we were having so many problems. They interviewed hundreds of our workers. The report was devastating. Employees said they felt like machines, not people. They said management treated them as disposable. The consultants concluded that our workplace culture was directly responsible for the safety issues and quality problems." Marcus felt no satisfaction in being proven right. He had known Richard for years and understood that the other CEO was genuinely struggling to save his company and the jobs of thousands of workers. "Richard, Rosa, and I can help, but you need to understand that this isn't a quick fix. Real culture change takes time and consistent commitment. I'm ready to do whatever it takes, Marcus. I can't let this company fail." The project at Blackstone Industries became one of the Institute's most comprehensive undertakings. Rosa spent 3 weeks at the company's main facility, talking to workers at every level and observing daily operations. What she found was a workplace where fear dominated every interaction. "Mr. Wellington, these employees are terrified," Rosa reported during one of their daily calls. "They're afraid to report safety concerns because they might be blamed for problems. They're afraid to suggest improvements because managers might see it as criticism. They're afraid to take sick days because they might be fired. Fear is killing this company." Marcus and Rosa developed a detailed plan for transforming Blackstone's culture. The first step was establishing trust, which meant demonstrating that employees could speak honestly without facing retaliation. They created anonymous feedback systems and hired ombudsmen to investigate worker concerns. They implemented safety committees with frontline employee representation. Most importantly, they required all managers to undergo training on respectful communication and employee development. The transformation at Blackstone took 2 years, but the results were dramatic. Workplace accidents decreased by 80%. Employee turnover dropped to industry average levels. Productivity increased, and product quality improved significantly. The company not only avoided bankruptcy but became profitable again. "Marcus, I owe you an apology," Richard told him at a business dinner 2 years after their collaboration began. "I thought all that employee stuff was just expensive sentiment. I didn't understand that treating people well is actually the smartest business strategy there is." As the Wellington Institute's reputation grew, Marcus and Rosa found themselves speaking at conferences around the world. They addressed business schools, testified before congressional committees, and consulted with international organizations. Rosa, who had once been afraid to speak up in any situation, became a confident and compelling speaker. During a presentation at Harvard Business School, a student asked Rosa how the experience had changed her view of herself. "I used to think my worth was determined by how invisible I could be," Rosa answered. "I thought the best employees were the ones who never caused problems, never asked questions, never drew attention to themselves. But Mr. Wellington taught me that my ideas and experiences had value. Once I believed that about myself, everything else became possible." Marcus watched Rosa address the future business leaders and felt proud of how far they had both come. The shy woman who had been afraid to ask for help was now teaching some of the brightest minds in the country about leadership and human dignity. But their greatest satisfaction came from the stories of individual employees whose lives had been changed by the Institute's work. They heard from Maria Gonzalez at Meridian Industries, who had been promoted to plant manager after her process improvement suggestions saved the company millions. They received a letter from Robert Johnson, the maintenance worker who had become the company's safety director and had implemented programs that prevented dozens of potential accidents. Most meaningful was a call from Jennifer Walsh, the former quality control inspector who had used Meridian's education program to earn an engineering degree and was now designing manufacturing processes for the company. "Ms. Martinez, I wanted you to know that my son started college this year," Jennifer told Rosa during the call. "He's studying business, and he says he wants to run a company like the ones you and Mr. Wellington helped create. He wants to be the kind of leader who sees the potential in everyone." Rosa shared the story with Marcus later that day. "Mr. Wellington, do you realize what's happening? We're not just changing companies. We're changing how an entire generation thinks about work and leadership." Marcus nodded, understanding the profound impact of what they had started. "Rosa, that rainy night when I found you on the street, I thought I was helping one person. I never imagined we would end up helping thousands of people. Maybe that's how real change happens," Rosa reflected. "One person at a time, one company at a time, until eventually the whole world looks different." The Wellington Institute continued to grow, but Marcus and Rosa were careful to maintain their focus on quality rather than quantity. They turned down clients who weren't genuinely committed to change, and they insisted on long-term partnerships rather than quick consulting contracts. "We're not in the business of making companies look good," Marcus told a potential client who wanted a 3-month program for public relations purposes. "We're in the business of making companies actually be good." 5 years after that transformative night, Marcus and Rosa stood together on the stage of the United Nations, addressing an international conference on workplace dignity. Rosa was about to receive the UN's Human Rights in Business Award, recognizing her work in promoting dignity for workers around the world. "Ladies and gentlemen," the UN Secretary-General announced, "Rosa Martinez represents the power of one person's courage to change not just their own life, but the lives of countless others. From sleeping on the street to standing before world leaders, she embodies the human potential that exists in every workplace, waiting to be recognized and nurtured." As Rosa accepted the award, she looked out at the audience of diplomats, business leaders, and activists. Many of them had heard her story and wanted to understand how someone could overcome such obstacles to achieve international recognition. "This award doesn't belong to me alone," Rosa said. "It belongs to every worker who has been overlooked, every person who has been told they don't matter, every human being whose potential has been ignored. Change is possible, but it starts with one simple recognition. Every person has dignity, and every workplace can be a place where that dignity is honored." In the audience, Marcus felt tears in his eyes. The woman on stage was the same person he had found sleeping in the rain, but she had discovered strengths and capabilities that had always been there, waiting for the right opportunity to emerge. After the ceremony, as they walked through the UN building together, Rosa turned to Marcus with a question she had been thinking about for months. "Mr. Wellington, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night? If you had just driven by like you had so many times before?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "I think about it sometimes, Rosa. But then, I realized that stopping wasn't really about chance or luck. Somewhere inside, I was ready to see differently. Maybe the student was ready to appear because the teacher was ready to learn." Rosa smiled at the reversal of their roles. "So who was the teacher, and who was the student?" "Both of us, Rosa. We taught each other what was possible. As they left the United Nations building that evening, Marcus and Rosa walked past a small group of maintenance workers who were cleaning the lobby. Rosa stopped to thank them for their work, speaking to each person individually and asking about their experiences working at the UN. Marcus watched this interaction and realized that Rosa would never stop seeing and valuing every person she encountered. It wasn't a habit she had developed for her new role. It was who she had always been. The difference now was that she had a platform to act on those values. The ripples of change that had started with one act of kindness on a rainy night continued to spread. Companies around the world were implementing dignity-based management practices. Business schools were teaching courses based on the Wellington model. A new generation of leaders was learning that true success meant creating workplaces where every person could thrive. But for Marcus and Rosa, the most important changes were the personal ones. Marcus had discovered that wealth meant nothing without purpose, and that purpose came from lifting others up along the way. Rosa had learned that her worth wasn't determined by her job title or income, but by her contributions to making the world a more just and compassionate place. Years later, when business historians would write about the transformation of corporate culture in the early 21st century, they would trace many changes back to a simple moment. A billionaire who stopped his car on a rainy night and saw a human being instead of a homeless person. That moment had changed 2 lives immediately and thousands of lives eventually. It had proven that real transformation begins not with policies or programs, but with the decision to see each other's humanity. And once that seeing begins, there's no limit to what becomes possible. Rosa Martinez had gone from sleeping on the street to addressing world leaders, but her greatest achievement was simpler and more profound. She had never stopped believing that every person deserves dignity, and she had helped others learn to see that truth as well. Marcus Wellington had gone from being a successful businessman to being a leader who changed how business is conducted. But his greatest achievement was learning that true wealth comes from the lives you touch and the people you empower along the way. Together, they had discovered that the distance between a street corner and the United Nations isn't measured in miles or years. It's measured in moments of recognition, acts of courage, and the decision to believe that everyone's story matters. Their story continued to inspire others to look more carefully at the people around them, to listen more deeply to voices that had been ignored, and to remember that behind every job title is a human being with dreams, struggles, and the potential to contribute something valuable to the world. The ripples of change they had started would continue spreading long after their own story was complete, touching lives they would never know and creating possibilities they had never imagined. Because that's how real change works, one person at a time, one act of dignity at a time, until the whole world looks different. Rosa's eyes lit up. Mr. Wellington, 6 months ago, I was sleeping on the street. Now you're asking me to help teach other business leaders. Sometimes I can't believe this is real life. It's real, Rosa. And it's just the beginning. As they began planning their next chapter together, Marcus realized that helping Rosa that rainy night had been the best business decision he had ever made. Not because it had improved his company's performance, although it had. Not because it had increased his profits, although it had done that too. It had been the best business decision because it had reminded him that business, at its core, is about people serving people. And when you get that right, everything else follows. Opal all day, and they would look right through me like I wasn't there. You made me feel like I matter, like I'm a real person with value. That's worth more than money or apartments or anything else you could give me. As Rosa left his office that night, Marcus realized that helping her had changed him as much as it had helped her. He had discovered something that all his money and success couldn't buy: the satisfaction that comes from recognizing the humanity in every person you meet. The rain was falling again outside his office window, just like it had that night 3 weeks ago. But everything was different now. Marcus looked out at the city lights and thought about all the Rosa Martinezes out there, working hard and dreaming of better lives for their families. Tomorrow, he decided, he would start looking for more ways to make a difference, because he had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or stock options. It was measured in the lives you touched and the people you lifted up along the way. And by that measure, Marcus Wellington was finally becoming truly rich.